Yeah.
What?
I'm trying to get the live stream going. This is very distracting. We're never gonna have this working if you can't mention those, not the Route 1 culvert, not.
It was Merry Meeting Day. I
think we only heard from him. No,
Say what?
we only heard from Eric. He wasn't here.
I did, I heard him.
Yeah. Gold level. Mr.
Oh,
Powers.
that's a tough way to get out of the meeting.
Hey, you don't know it.
Hey, Joe. Just one member, everything because of medical issue. Not a big deal.
Somebody did not have their computer was down, like.
That would be great since I'm using my computer for the live streaming.
Seriously, 26.
Yeah.
I need a little more, like,
Yeah.
Man.
Do you want one?
Yeah,
You
sure.
can use mine.
I'm computer illiterate, so.
Yeah, I can-
Well, good.
Keep it that way for as long as you can.
All right.
Exactly.
Ladies and gentlemen, we'll call the order of the board of directors meeting for Mitchell Solid October 26, 2022. Just general, a couple of general information. And one, this is a little off schedule meeting. Normally, our normal process is bi-monthly, starting in July. So July, but now September, we didn't have the information. So this is a kind of a special one. We are scheduled for 1 November, but I will let everybody know in advance if we have the need for that. And if we don't have the need for that, we will leave in January, and that will be FYI, the start of our budgeting process and as we usually do. Well, I'll let you know. It's really dependent on, like I said, one of the items on our agenda tonight, what we need to address. So that's why we have the meeting tonight. Thank you for coming. The second item is I want to welcome Jim Anderson to the board.
Thank you.
I know you've been on this area before. We welcome you, and Jim has obviously been is a sense of taking the stead of Deborah Hall. With that intro, we want to get into our agenda. First item is we have any public or director comments on non-agenda items? No. If not, we'll go to review and approval of comment on the July 27, 2022 minutes. Any comments or motion to approve?
I move to approve the July 27th, 2022 meeting minutes as written.
second.
Any discussion, ladies and gentlemen? Not saying any, we'll move to a vote. All those in favor? Opposed? You're not gonna vote? Try to-
I'm gonna abstain.
All right.
I wasn't here, so
Well, you can, yeah. Yep.
that's kind of the rule.
Yeah, I know that Jim wasn't here, but
I'm
Jim
abstaining.
That's okay. Jim, you can vote, you can vote because you're voting for Eric. He sent an email said.
Right.
He gave me that right.
Right.
That was correct.
Yeah. So with that, we'll move on to our.
And of course, I'm sure he watched the live stream.
Very
He knows everything that happened.
I did it. I was in Blueberry Field, so.
Oh, boy. I remember them days.
Brian, thank you for challenging me.
Yeah.
With that, you're gonna have fun, work hard later. We, in our packet tonight, as usual, we have our manager report, Dave's report, before we ask David, are there any questions on any of the items on the manager report? Not hearing any now. Dave, is there anything you want to, in that report, you think should be highlighted in this broadcast, in this meeting, that stands out as a.
Well, just for the general public, let them know that we're working on trying to create an optional second area for recycling to be brought into the building, which will kind of cut back on the amount of work involved with moving the recycling that's collected out in the larger dumpsters and roll-offs to bringing it inside the building. So we're hopefully being able to drive right up to the window, throw it right into the building, right where it actually ends up being to begin with, where we need it. The idea is, not putting a lot of capital into those improvements, trying them out a little bit, see how they work, and then expanding on them if they work well, and maybe coming up with a different game plan if they don't. But I think they'll work. Just gonna take some fine tuning.
Oh, you're gonna have to move the scale, right? Yeah.
That's part of it, but that's why we're just trying it right now, and if it seems like it works, then yeah, we would relocate the scale possibly.
Hey, I can see a real cluster there, real quick.
Hmm.
I mean, the parking lot, you go down there, Saturday, and the parking lot's full.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean, you try to fit all those people in,
we'd have to create 5 lanes. You'd have 5 lanes
that's what I'm saying.
and then a passing lane.
Yeah.
And I mean, we thought it through and, you know, it doesn't give as much of an area for people to go on both sides and double up on both sides. But on the other hand, you think about the effort that goes into moving recycling from those roll-offs into the building with the truck and the roll-offs and the danger and the shuffling things back and forth. Probably 80% of the recycling costs are associated with moving that stuff back and forth. So really, I mean, any kind of lean manufacturing environment that tell you to eliminate the waste, and that's all waste in between where you collect it and where you're bringing it. You really need to put it right where it belongs. So you handle it once.
Not to mention the speed increase for people to just walk down the line versus walking up and down those cans. I mean, you can get a workout doing that and it doesn't need to.
Yeah, you get lost.
There'll be pros and cons to both operations, but I think if you put, you know, if you make a list and you say, all right, what are all the benefits? And then you look at you look at one system versus the cost of the other system, you're gonna find, I think, that there might be a slight inconvenience cost at peak hours for people going through and putting the recycling, if you put them all through that area, but your gains are gonna be significant. You're gonna gain in spending of the operation, safety of the operation, public safety, public convenience. You'll be under an awning. You're not in an area that's all open blowing around. It'll be easier to maintain. You don't have the forklift, you don't have the freight liner, you don't have the roll-offs. I mean, you just the list goes on and on and on. Doesn't mean it's gonna work. We gotta try it and see if it works, but this is what the process is.
Well, I don't know that it work, but it's gonna be expensive to make it work.
Not really.
What's it gonna cost to move the scale?
That was my question.
The scale,
It's gonna be cheap.
scale, I mean, you gotta think about those scales have been there for a long time. The load cells and everything probably need to be evaluated and looked at. There's probably fatigue, metal fatigue in the scale itself. It probably at a point where it needs to be upgraded, so. Probably what I would do is bring everybody in, have the scale company in, main scale, have them look the scale all over. At that point, do any improvements to the scale that needs to be happened at the same time as moving it. Moving that scale is not gonna be that big of a deal. That's just sitting on the ground. It's not really affixed to anything.
Where would you move it further away? How much area do we
There's-
own to the?
there's a
right
couple-
of the scale?
There's a couple things you could do. You could kind of move it over towards the guard railing.
Right.
You know, where the roll-offs are now, and bring everybody over that way. You're gonna have one point where you're gonna have crisscrossing traffic like you do now. It's not gonna, you know, you'll always have that because of the configuration of the facility, but. I think we have a couple options. I think the most important thing is we don't decide, you know, I mean, I haven't decided at this point in time. I think that's an exercise of implementing the change. We're calling it the hybrid model and watching flow traffic use that and see how that all works. And then based on what we see there, you know, you may have to move the gatehouse back. So you have more of a accumulation line. You might maybe put the scale up by the gatehouse when you first drive in. You know, I mean, I don't think that's what it's gonna be, but there's a lot of options over there. But in the end, you open up the facility. You have significantly more room if you do that. And that facility really is restricted.
Yeah,
the amount of
you
room
should be able to work on the one-way traffic, then if you're gonna do that, you know, so you don't have the crisscrossing going that way and this way, you know, going one way.
It would be, but that's where all you guys will get involved when we get to that point.
One step at a time.
I mean, we've spent so much, looking, you were on board probably, right, when we did all those designs for possible facility redesigns, and we're gonna take the $1 million we got from the MRC and then borrow 2 million more and do this massive redesign, which thank God we didn't do that, because that was all to get to single stream, which we now know would cost us a heck of a lot more. But there were some, you know, with all the exercises we did and redesigning, there were some kind of interesting things that came out of that with the possibility of, 2 scales. You know, obviously there's a cost to all of it, but the numbers they were coming up with before to make the facility better, you know, hopefully we're gonna be in a different realm than that at least.
And we can look at some of those. There might be some good ideas in there with the scale.
One second, when we discussed before, just as a first step to check out and test the cases.
Right. If anything, it'll take the pressure off the containers, so we don't have to move the containers back and forth.
Well, that's a huge safety.
Right. You know, if you cut the amount of traffic or moving those roll-offs back and forth by 50%, you've made a huge improvement by the amount of effort and safety issues, just by 50%.
Right.
So it may not be 100%.
We'll see how it goes.
So, sorry,
Go ahead, Joe.
one last thing. So in this hybrid model, will the gatehouse direct half of the traffic to the building and half to the roll containers?
I've thought about that a little bit, and what I want to do is I want to make some big signs and maybe have somebody post it up front explaining that, hey, we're trying this out. Why don't you try this over here? I think that's how we want to roll that out. So that, you know, and maybe even put like a box at the end that asks for feedback, you know, how do you like this? Is this better? Or just talking to people standing out there. I think that's really the best thing to do in those situations.
One of those side benefits of doing that is there'll be less backup at the gatehouse. Because they could direct some people to go over there and we're there. They don't have that right now. Oftentimes the gatehouse thing is backed up because of, well, the roll-offs cause it, but we'll see how that plays.
And some of your gatehouse, well, probably most of your gatehouse traffic has a quick conversation with your guy at the
Yeah.
gatehouse anyway,
Yeah,
so
yeah.
he is really gonna be able to dictate, okay, you know,
Try
something,
that.
gotta have you down there,
Yeah.
you know, there's too much there, I gotta have you over
Yep.
here.
I agree.
For right now, and
Yeah.
it's gonna give us a chance to analyze whether this is gonna work.
Exactly.
And I'm excited about it. Do you have a targeted time?
I've cut, so in my Andrew's report, you
Yeah,
see that
I saw that.
I've cut the concrete. That's the big first step. You know,
Yeah.
now we're gonna frame out the windows and we're probably gonna be able to start a lot. We're gonna put the high volume items in those first 4 stalls. Well, 2 of them are cardboard.
Yeah.
But the other 2, I think is mixed paper, and I think
Cans.
I think cans was the other one I
Yeah.
talked
Yeah.
about.
Good.
So I mean, it's a little bit at a time because they're always busy over there. That's the thing. And we're really not, you know, hiring a bunch of contractors to go out and do a big job. It's they call it creativity before capital. You know, you're
Yeah.
trying to,
Yeah.
you're trying
Lot
to,
of work there.
yeah, you're just trying to,
It's a good idea.
you know, not put a lot of effort. I think we have $1,500 into it right now.
Right.
So that's not a lot.
Good.
Yeah.
All right, let's move on.
And
to our-
one last thing.
Go ahead, Dave.
The only thing that space is being used for right now is for sitting out for break and parking the Freightliner. So it's not like we're losing out by doing this, you know.
I have just a question, can I?
Yeah, of course, yeah.
How about I was in there today looking for a job you done.
Mhm.
It's good. I just question the size of the hole. People, I mean, you wouldn't believe what people come in there with cardboard, but they try to stuff through a little teeny hole.
So what I did
Anyway,
was I took the size of the holes that were being used now and I made them a little bit bigger.
Yeah.
I figured, you know, you can't go wrong with
They're
that.
already put it in that hole, so.
Right, that's the way I looked at it.
Mattress.
About the bagger, not the bagger itself, the baler,
Oh, the baler?
baler, yeah,
Okay, yeah.
that baby's got a lot of hours on it.
Sure does.
So in the manager's report, there's a section in there that talks about the rebuild.
Yeah,
Yeah,
is it worth rebuilding?
absolutely. Absolutely. I would take an old vehicle and put a glider kit on it and, you know, and fix it before I would buy a new vehicle any day of the week. And it's just like the equipment.
What?
Oh, yeah. Well,
Well,
to a certain extent.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cloudflex too.
Well, that's a little different, but that baler, it's just wear parts we need to replace. It isn't like the
no,
mechanics.
Yeah, right.
type of stuff.
Seals,
Right.
slides,
Slides,
Yeah.
slides, I was talking to
Yeah.
the kid today, he said the slides are pretty much gone,
right.
you know.
And we found a guy or person that can do that work, so.
Well, Valley went out of business, who took their place?
So there's a guy out of Pembroke right now. Yeah, and he's doing, I think at United. Anyway, he's doing most of the work for, I think, Hannaford and a bunch of other the bigger outfits. And you know, the only other game in town is Atlantic. And they came in with a really high price. So if you read in the manager report, I think the difference was 60,000
Yeah.
estimated versus 20.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, it was a huge.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's worth giving the
Meaning they
guy,
don't really need the work.
And that's what's
Right.
happening all over.
and they're out of New Hampshire, and they know they're the only ones around.
They did go dance in the street. But let's move on to the next item, which is filling some slots for missing committee members, basically. In the packet you saw, we have 4 committees: governance, capital, strategic, curriculum. Committees. On governance, Deb Hall was on that committee, but now we have a missing spot. So the chair thing, I would strongly recommend that most boards agree that from the committee members, they should be choosing the chair. From that group. But the governance committee is missing 1 person. Does anybody want to work on the governance committee? Or have you?
Sure.
Brian? You're a good man.
You are.
Not having Deb is gonna take a little wind out of the sail of that one, but,
That's
probably be as needed, maybe a little bit.
Yeah, right. Well, the governance had been fairly active and we had a number of things on these that they kind of stalled now with the change, but. All right, so Brian will be a member of the governance committee.
Who else is on that?
His current late me,
Oh,
I'd like to be on the
Yes.
online planning committee. Yeah.
which one?
The long range planning.
Yeah, Kevin, Kevin.
all
Let's discuss that one, if we get one at a time. First, we
okay.
have governance, I'll get there to mention. But so I think having 3 in that committee is probably, unless anybody else wants to be on, that's good, that we haven't run, that would be very helpful. Now, to the question of the capital and strategic planning, they're actually, other than the potential for a town manager, which we used to carry, that was when Beckham, when Bill Post was on it, we don't have a town manager person, but right now it's myself. Oops. I think it's Eric, and Allison,
And I'm on
and Kern, we just,
Yeah.
it's just
it.
possible.
Do we need a town manager on
What? No, I don't think we
Or
do. I
that?
don't,
Administrator, town
no,
manager?
well, for example, you can, and there's no reason you should.
Does the bylaws call for it?
not anymore.
Not anymore, I think.
Have you, did he get a new copy of the new bylaws and stuff yet? Okay. Well, this changed.
We're trying to get away a little bit from the need
That's on-
for basically sort of babysitting. Because it's either asking them to be at all of the meetings, is just, in my opinion, a huge burden to put on busy town managers. We got rid of the requirement for, I think it used to be that 2 town managers needed to be here even for us to have a meeting at all.
Right.
Correct.
I mean,
And a lot of meetings were canceled because we didn't get that.
right, so it's like having them,
That's good.
I do find that having John Duke and David Kinney on the finance committee is a huge asset. But
Yeah, we're going to have, Allison is the only board member, and actually, but back to.
Eric is
Eric is
too.
he's not on the list. Is he? Eric Boucher? I mean, I don't.
Maybe not, maybe I just thought he would be good and I did that.
Well,
Yeah, his
I
background.
know you good and you're coming to the meeting.
He volunteered,
Right.
his email, he said if he needed anybody.
Right, I believe he did, yeah.
For finance,
He didn't say,
Yes.
he wasn't specific.
he'd be great, yeah, let's
He-
have him, 'cause he had Wendy
He's
before.
currently on personnel. But I
Oh,
think,
right, he's good on
Yeah,
his status.
but he'd be good on finance. Josh,
Oh, sorry, I don't know if this is helpful. I would like to be on the capital and strategic planning committee as well. This is my first chance to vocalize the committee I'd like to be on. So I'll just say it and put it out there. I don't
no,
know.
it's great, I mean, so Jim has mentioned the same thing, and we don't obviously, I think there should be 4 maximum on the committee. We can discuss the
Four.
town manager thing, so if we're gonna make any changes, then we have to change some of these.
We should have a balance of the towns.
Maybe it seems like everybody wants.
Well,
to
you can
finish
take
that one
Eric, it
board
says that
meeting.
Eric is currently on that, he'd
Right.
probably go to finance and wouldn't care, maybe.
He might be better. at
But
planning.
that's what I mean, because his background.
Yeah.
Well,
Did you want to see a copy of the bylaws? 'Cause it is a-
no, we're not now,
I got one.
we're not gonna address the
It
bylaws.
does say he's to be on it.
Oh, yeah, I know. But the, if Eric pulls off and we're missing a. Well, we could have a block person, we already have a living person, so,
Not that we don't want you on it.
Yeah.
It's just that the balance
yeah.
is,
I mean, in some ways, if there are issues, there's a lot, I remember when I wasn't on the capital and strategic planning committee, and it was like all these, it's like all the fun issues were going there. I mean, sometimes we just want to tackle things as a whole board.
That's true.
Rather than,
True.
for not everything needs to go to a small committee, sometimes
That's very true.
it's, you know, we should decide as a board, I think, which things are gonna be delegated to a committee
Mhm.
and which things we want to, just tackle as a board by going over there and.
Very important. I think, especially strategic planning, because in the past, what we've done is develop options. For the
And then
review
come
by the board.
yeah.
And, that's really what the intent of it is, and all practical options were presented and discussed.
And that's the same with the governance committee.
Absolutely, absolutely. There's no power here, so it's.
It's
No,
always been that
no.
they're open to everyone.
I was gonna say,
So
can't anybody
can go.
go, you just can't go.
Yeah, they can. So,
Why don't you show up?
This-
Much like you did tonight.
there's no reason why people can't show up, just if we wind up 6 people, you know what? I'm gonna put it on the board.
Yeah.
Because that's a waste of time, we're gonna do it twice, but
Yeah.
just like Alex said, we can, most do some homework, Dave can, or somebody
Yeah.
can bring it to the board, so. Unless, if we can change out Eric, if you'd like, I'm not sure we need a town manager there at all, calls for him. We did it back when Bill Post was.
But it's-
we never replaced it.
It's still calling for one.
In some of these cases, like Beth talks about, the bylaws and call for having it.
Does it say that they're supposed to have to come in?
There's two.
This is that at
Oh,
least
two
two
of-
directors, two ex officio board members and the facility manager.
Okay. So we really,
Yeah, I mean, we
Oh,
can
right.
change it. They don't show up, I really don't.
Yeah.
Because I wouldn't know who to peg because they're all so darn busy.
yeah, I think that's the other thing we were trying to do is,
Just with governance.
it was,
Remember, governance
sure,
was
it's
looking,
up.
we were looking, governance was looking at changing. that.
yeah, and we still should.
We still should. So I suggest we want to change the lyric, fine. We could do that. That's up to the board. Anything, like I said, this is.
We haven't delegated any issues at this point
No.
to that committee, so
No.
it's sort of like,
No,
doesn't,
so I don't, what are we suggesting for members then? We have, right now, we have myself, Eric, Kern, and Jonathan. And I think four is plenty, so I don't care if you want to.
Yeah,
swap out, we
I
don't
think,
care.
I think the board is fine, although anybody can.
I mean, really, we should encourage that sometimes, because usually the issue we have is not being able to get,
That's true.
um,
That's true.
like,
That's true. Well, unless it's a pressing need, I would just leave it the way it is for now to see how it tracks. And
Yeah.
and then the board should also understand what the strategic committee is looking at too.
Right.
And this should be a surprise thing. So, hasn't been in the past. When we looked at, last big thing was when we looked at hauling, when we looked at solid waste disposal, and we did all the homework and presented. the-
Yeah, and it was, and when we did that, Bob, we did our homework, we presented to the board, but then there were future goals or for future meetings, what we were gonna work for.
True.
And so the board always knew what we were looking at, so, and I think it's what we.
Well, I think the first task for each committee is to present that to the board, what they're going to be working on, just in case there's disagreement with what we're focusing on, including governance, strategic planning. I'm not sure about the personnel situation, but we'll just leave it as it is for now and see how it tracks. And I'm sorry,
we really need a functioning personnel committee for when
yeah,
it's needed. I mean, I think it should be on an as needed
yes.
basis, but it's always turns out that when we really need one, it's not, it's too loosey goosey and nobody's in charge. So if we could just,
We have reaped the benefits of that, and that wasn't cool. That was not cool.
Yeah, I still. agree.
oh, yeah.
So I mean, just bringing that up, we just had a training session. Was it last week? Last week, or harassment. And the policy actually says that. If the chain of command is, if you're having problems with another employee, come see me, but if they're having problems with me, they need a place to go other than And that's important because, you know,
That was a problem before.
I wasn't gonna say anything, but I
It's
mean,
still
I think you need. I think you need some checks and balances to keep, you know, so for somebody to feel comfortable to go. To someone else, because then you're putting them in a situation where, you know, they don't have no place to go.
Well, I think,
It actually says the board now,
Yeah.
which I had always thought it was kind of like when employees would approach us, it was like, well, this isn't appropriate. And
Member
then
of
when I
board,
actually went down, sat down with Mike and read the policy.
Yeah.
It was like, oh, it does say the board, so. The board, you know, that needs to be clear. What does the board mean to an
Yeah.
employee?
Personnel,
I guess-
policy of the board, I think is
You
what
know.
you need.
well, the board should delegate to personnel committee, but I think
Yeah,
we need to add a board member to this committee. to the
Yeah.
Personnel committee. We have Samantha and Audrey there, they're great advisors, but honestly, they need to go to chairperson, and that chairperson, in my opinion, should be of the three board members, one should be a chairperson.
Yes.
We need one more there.
Yeah, and
The-
Eric was good. He knows a lot about HR personnel, so I think that's why we had him on there. Sure.
Should we
I just inherited
ask
it.
him?
Well, I should say,
Should we ask him,
has to-
Eric?
Isn't Eric on it now?
He's on it
he's on
now.
now.
Oh, okay.
He's on now.
So I just want to make sure that we remember, we did say it would be beneficial for us if we had two, either town managers, because they deal with that type of stuff a lot more than we do. And they're more fluent with the laws, you know what
Yeah,
I
of
mean?
course,
And
No,
I just think that's
I think
important.
there, that's fine, yeah.
We have two members.
Yep.
On the committee now, but to the idea, to the thing of some employee who has a problem, not talking to the board, should talk, still talk to the chair of this committee, and that chair should be one of them, I think, three.
Yeah.
Board members.
So we need someone from Camden or Hope. Who wants to be on it?
Right.
From Camden or Hope.
I mean, oh, and or.
Or. So one of the four from Camden.
We have Lincolnville and Rockport covered at the moment.
I mean, I don't mind doing it if nobody else wants to, provided it's not, doesn't turn into a thing where there's like this huge, like, I don't want to rewrite, I don't have time to rewrite the personnel policy or something like that, but it's an added.
We've done very little. for
Right,
2
I-
years. Don't
yeah.
worry.
Yeah.
I do see an issue occasionally with the town
Like
managers. Because the town managers end up, their biggest fear often tends to be that we might do something for Midco solid waste employees that is more beneficial than what they're giving to their employees in the town. And we run into that a few times where they're like, oh, everybody's gonna be coming and asking for this. And so there's like a little bit of a conflict there, but if we're cautious about the, you know, the types of,
Yeah, cautious and consistent. I
yeah,
think it'd be
Yeah,
fun.
the way, if you and I had the end constituents, we use the advice of the town managers.
Yeah.
Acting, we're kind of acting as a consultant, and the advice of town managers, make sure, and most importantly, our labor attorney. With a great advisor on what we should do and shouldn't do in terms of personnel matter, in case we weren't. But here, what I'm suggesting is we're in three board members, two. But three board members, one should be chair, they should take the lead on personnel matters, using the advice of the town manager.
actually, yeah, that's a good point about the labor attorney. Sometimes we're a little quick to get advice from the town managers, but there's a reason. He was good when we need to be prepared to,
So you want to do the personnel? thing?
I'm
Or
willing
something
to.
else does?
I don't want to be chair.
Oh, I get that.
Josh wants to be
I
chair.
get Josh.
If Eric, I mean, I'll be happy to be chair. If Eric doesn't want to be chair.
Well, you're
Josh, you
here, so.
guys,
but-
we'll leave it to you guys to flip a coin and let that know.
Because that's the thing, is needing somebody to be like the one that
I'm
is
sorry.
contacted,
Yes.
you know, because that's what's happened before. Oh, where's one thing? He isn't meeting. I don't even know. It's like, well, somebody take the bull by the horns then.
Can we go a step further and make a policy, give the personnel board, make them the contact for the,
Grievances.
Yes.
Sure.
basically grievances with the manager, basically. Yeah.
Why don't we meet with Eric?
Yes. But that policy should be documented.
Well, I want to update employees with who the people are, so if they have a problem. they can-
Yeah, so you guys should have a meeting, elect a
And
chair,
decide how you want to handle that.
or
Yeah,
tell
and
Eric
then,
he's the
then you would have to
chair.
bring that, then that would come to the board and the board would vote for that policy change, correct?
Well, it's already in the policy that grievances go to the board. It's already written in the,
Yeah, but as you said, the board is arbitrary. What-
Right.
What board are we talking about? The
board
board of
of
directors?
directors, us.
Right. So they would be the ones that would vote to make this change. That the person doesn't come to the board, us, they would go to the personnel
It's,
board.
The board would have to change the document.
Right,
it's just the wording needs to
Right.
be changed. there.
right. So that they understand who they're going to.
Yeah.
They're going to say Josh or Eric
We
first,
may not want
not
to
to
change
you,
the
Bob.
union contract right now, but
Yeah, union contract is a little careful, but we can do that in the
Well,
future.
in the interim, Dave can just tell them.
Right,
Yeah, I just want to give them a point of contact.
right.
Yeah.
It should be an action officially changed.
Right.
And that's a governance committee thing.
Yes.
We'll bring to-
all right.
See, you're in.
Bang.
So back to Jim's request, do he and Eric talk to one another and switch for say, because you wanted to be on the strategic committee
I
and,
can do it.
yeah,
All right, you should just discuss it with Eric.
What's that?
Discuss it with Eric.
What they intend to do.
Okay,
Yeah.
great. Great, let us know.
Yeah.
All right, the last one is the finance committee. We seem to be a little short-handed there. We need another member.
Well, I
We have
think we,
two town managers, but do we have another? Just
oh, well, we
just-
sort of drafted Eric. I thought, I mean, I really
Yes.
felt in my,
yeah, I thought we did
I
too.
thought we did too.
Yeah.
All right, let's take.
Hope he's okay with all this.
Finance committee for Eric, and that may be tip
Right.
the scale for him to get off the strategic. area.
I got a deal for
I
you.
want to get up the whole board. but yeah.
Right. So this is what we think you would be good at.
All right. Make my own notes.
And that's what you do when you're not here.
Yeah, you're taking it.
Sorry, Eric.
Yeah.
That's what he said. He said he volunteered. He's gonna volunteer, the military, right? Okay, fine. Thank you. To the meat of our agenda item next is the discussion about the related to our water.
Well,
Monitoring well. Dave, why don't you lead us as to where we are, what you need from us?
Okay, so I gave a brief kind of description of the condition of the two wells and the reality is that we're running the pump in a well and we're only down about 56 feet. It doesn't give us much time if there's a problem. So if the pump fails, or if we get a lot of rain like we do every spring, we end up going over the 98 feet mean sea level, which pushes us into further regulatory testing of the groundwater. We really should be able to bring that water level down further than that to give us a buffer for when we have high rainfall events, which we're supposed to be shutting off. So like right now, you know, I can control everything from my phone now. I can shut the pump off
did you shut it off?
and it's off right now. So
Okay.
you can see on the manager's report, it shows it on. This is in the off setting. So, and you know, at any point in time, I can turn this on, I can look at it and see what the flow is. It's like waking up on the other side of the German line, you know, it's just great. It's so much better, because I mean, it's hard keeping track of all that, and then and you're only getting a snapshot when you're there. You're not really seeing what it is all the time. You really need to kind of watch that all the time.
I wonder if the yacht club, I don't know if anybody's ever seen the sewer manhole covers at the yacht club overflowing, but it happens quite a bit. So I always kind of wonder if we were to, because we haven't been before this, they were not shutting off that pump during extreme rain events. And so I wonder if it made it be fun
I'm sure it does
to
at
hang out there and monitor.
a certain point. It has to,
Right.
yeah.
So probably proposals for a second well.
Well, there's two wells. So you have the production well or the extraction well, and then you have the monitoring well. So the monitoring well, the reason why that one isn't functioning properly is really it should be a piezometer according to the state rule. And the piezometer, basically, they screen off a certain area within the column of the landfill to accurately monitor the level of the well, the production well. What was installed was a monitoring well, not a piezometer, but a monitoring well. So a monitoring well has the whole area screened off right to the very bottom. And what happened was when they drilled the hole and then they drilled the casing and then they pulled the casing out. When they went to pull the casing out, the casing broke and it broke around a good portion of the screen. So it's really not ever, it's never really reflected, you know, accurately per se, is the theory of what's really going on in the monitoring well. You could probably get by with it. But you know, it's kind of like bubble gum and, you know, band-aided on, so it's really not functioning the way it should be ultimately. And then the extraction well, we already know that was damaged during probably the fire, and it also has a kink in it. So what happened was back when 3-4 years ago when we had the fire, the pump heated up, it got hot, failed, the line, I think the power supply line got burned. They went to pull it out. They couldn't pull the whole pump out. I think they pulled the motor out, the pump fell into the bottom. Once they got that out, they put another pump in the top and they went up to where the obstruction is, which is about 56 feet down, which it should be 70 feet down. So that's the current situation. And you've been there since 3 years ago.
Right.
And this never, I think there was a lot of talk. I don't know if there was talk, but I think there was talk about fixing it.
Yeah, there was talk about doing a new well.
Right, so, you know, this guy, this person, Drumlin Environmental, I've worked with him for almost 15 years. He's about as good as you get. Unfortunately, he's close to retirement, so he's not gonna be around for very much longer, but he's made a commitment to help me with this well, and we did decide to move forward with it.
Don't we kind of have to? I
I was
think,
gonna say, is there an
want to
alternative?
remember that
There is
the,
no alternative, right?
I mean, the DEP memo that I had seen a while back was kind of worded in a way that made it was like, you're out of compliance. We do not consider what you did to be.
Yeah, and you know, they haven't given us an NOV yet for not replacing it, but it's one of the things that from an operational standpoint, it should be fixed. From a regulatory standpoint, it's gonna have to be fixed. It's just a matter of when you do it. This is gonna be your well that you're gonna use it into closure.
For extraction.
Right, and really,
And past closure, right?
right,
Yes.
yeah, correct, this
Yes,
is it,
yes,
this is the well, you know,
Yeah.
so. You really, to me, the most important part, and Beth probably disagrees with me a little bit on this, but. The most important part of the whole operation is this pump. You know what I mean, it's really, without this pump operating correctly, you get into all kinds of fines and contamination of the groundwater and odors and just a multitude of things.
Lily pond.
Fire, you know, I mean, you wet the waste, you pull the water out of the waste, it goes in the air, it starts breaking down and heating up. Then it creates, you know, oxidation, and next thing you know, you got a fire. It's just a chain reaction of not running it properly. So, you know, my recommendation would be to, you know, whether we do it now or do it later, you need to start thinking about budgeting the money to do this. I think we can make a justification for using closure money for this, and that's the DEP. That, another thought I had is we budgeted $60,000 for the repair of that compactor, and we've got a quote for 20 to fix it. That's 40 right there. And then we could probably maybe make up the difference with something else. That was the other.
Oh, you mean the baler?
Yeah,
This is in my opinion, a very clear closure expense.
sure, but they may say no. They may say we don't want, you know.
Yeah, they may.
I mean, they let us pay last time how much they actually they get to decide whether we use Lily Pond escrow. Closure, I think, is a little bit more wishy-washy, but they actually initially paid for 90% of the pumping system because it was, you know, to a remediation expense. You know, Lily Pond escrow is another thing that's there if we contaminate Lily Pond and we need to clean it up, but we paid for the gut, you know, that $700,000 project that was paid out of closure because, you know, it was considered that separating the water fill quarry from the mountain waste fill quarry is, you know, part of the long-term closure plan. So
You can do a plan.
Because we haven't budgeted enough for this.
You can do a plan A and plan. B.
I was gonna, Bob, that's what I was thinking. We asked the DEP, they say no, we have some funding that'll be left over.
Just to summarize effectively, this table you have in this note suggests a total around $75,000 to almost $90,000 range for a monitoring well installation, or an extraction well installation, pump purchase installation. Does that include controls?
No, I think the controls exist already. We already have a variable drive, we already have all of that.
Can you use the same stuff?
Yeah, we can, yeah.
All right, and that's important. An option for the well abandonment. Can you explain that?
So the well abandonment, usually when you abandon a well in a landfill, the solid waste rules require you to kind of fill it back in with bentonite, basically,
Right.
seal it off, unless you plan on using it for something else.
I-
So there was some option in there about taking the old production well and making that a monitoring well. He talks about that a little bit in there too, but I think you really want to just stick with a monitoring well and an extraction well.
I would agree with you.
Um,
So plan A, we would be looking to possibly get DEP to approve what number, $5,000 or something.
Well, I think it actually gave us a quote of more than that in the end, right?
It says 75 to 87. In your table.
Is that just the
In some-
extraction well?
In the table, but then if you read down,
Oh,
he says, based on the task description and cost information provided above, the total project cost is estimated to be in the range of 84.8 to 104.4.
I see.
No markups of subcontract costs.
Okay.
So, I mean, I think 100,000 would, is the magic number. I'm thinking it won't go that high, but he's being very cautious with his estimate.
Especially these days.
One of the things I was gonna say is that if the state, if part of your remediation, you got remediation money for putting in something from the state and it fails, and you got the reimbursement of 90%,
Yeah.
there is a rule in there that says they have to possibly fix it. And I'll check into that too.
Okay.
So that is potential. That'd be nice if they had to fix it, but they're gonna fight it.
So where this hasn't been right for a while, is there a timeline dictated to us, or we've just gotten certain bits and pieces of a conversation and we need to take care of this?
We, during the inspection, I told them the situation of the well, and they're kind of expecting me to give them some type of
They are.
timeline. for
Now
when
that
this
they're
will be
on
done.
board with it,
Yeah,
okay,
I told Rich that I would like to see this done in the winter time, this winter. Ideally, because that's when you're gonna get the best contractor rates, and doesn't mean that's what will happen if this is all approved and we get the funding for it, but that would be the goal. Because I really would like to have a pump that works before we get into spring. Because what happens is we get into spring and we always overshoot that 98, we can't keep up with the water. Infiltrating into the landfill, and then we do have to do the extra testing and.
so
We
you,
didn't used to overshoot that. I think, did you say there was something that because of the way the small area for placing the pump, it's not as,
The pump only pumps, 35 to 50 gallons a minute, depending how much
we used to
head
be
is
able to
in
do
it.
more than that.
It's because there was a bigger pump in there.
Right.
And the pump that they had to fit in above the obstruction is smaller.
Okay, so that is the,
35 is pretty generous for that kind of use.
It's a 35 gallons a minute. So the pump in there is only like a 2.5 horsepower pump.
Yeah.
So it's really not capable of, pumping all that much. So as you bring the water level down, it goes from like 50 to like 30 when you get down here, because it has to push up further. And it's
now,
less
did we
efficient.
use any additional electricity? How's that?
Well, those pumps work on a curve,
Mhm.
and you're supposed to be in the sweet spot when you're pumping all the time, and I'm sure we're not on the sweet spot with that, and so you use more power than you should. That's the other side.
But 2.5 horses is not that much power.
No, but if it's running inefficiently the whole time, it's less efficient than running.
20%, starts to get pretty close.
Right.
Right, and it's been extremely stressful in the past when the pump is failed and they've been very, I don't know why, I don't think.
It's stressful.
Around with this too much.
Because if it fails, and it's, you're in the spring months, you have weeks before you're starting to, climb up into the water column, and then you start having all that chain reaction problems that I talked about with, wetting the waste and then pouring the water out of the waste.
I have a quick question about rain events. Why do we turn off the pump during rain events?
So we have an agreement with Camden, and we have a per se agreement, wastewater discharge permit per se. And in there, part of it is during wet weather events, because of their permit, we're supposed to shut our flow off to them, because we already have a huge amount of I&I in the infiltration in the system in Camden. So what happens is, ultimately what happens is they can't keep up with the water just from the sewer system, never mind the transfer station, so they end up bypassing. So they don't even really treat at that point. So if we're pumping water to them while they're doing that, we're basically pumping untreated water to them.
Into the harbor, okay.
Into the harbor.
Yeah, so, and it's just a waste of time and money and just wear and tear to do it if it's not gonna be treated. Why pump
Right,
it?
and it's causing
Why pump
super
it if it's not
untreated
gonna be
water.
treated?
Right, but like Alice is saying, is if you pump it, well, if you're pumping landfill leachate while you're having this problem, the real water that probably, sewage needs to be treated, doesn't get treated.
Exactly.
Right, it's like the baby in the street hotels.
We have capacitors in the system to be able to do this, and then bring the level wouldn't rise that quickly.
Okay.
Yeah, what you're talking about.
Well, as long as we bring it down low enough.
Right, keep it low, so we have the.
Oh, yeah, that's the whole idea, is give yourself a little bit of capacity, a little bit of room, let's say, for infiltration of water. And it doesn't climb that quickly, but when you're only 8 feet from where you're gonna go over, that's not a lot of room.
And I find it difficult to argue any way, shape, or form we shouldn't do this. This is extremely important. The question is funding, of course, it's $100,000. And the plan A, we said, could be DED. Funds. But we should have a plan B right behind it.
So we did start meeting with the auditors today. We have a very healthy unassigned fund balance.
We do.
And that's another issue that was the auditors. The auditors are just meeting now. So we're a little bit behind schedule, considering we'd like to audited numbers for our budget, which is due in December 31st or whatever. But the unassigned fund balance is quite healthy, and we have authority as this board to spend from it. Most likely it ends up being that DEP reimburse, or no, it's not that they would reimburse us for that. We should first check and see if we can get them to pay for it through that cost sharing thing that when they initially installed. I mean, because they paid for 90% of this when it was installed, so you can try that out.
That'd be the first step.
Then we can say that we would want to use closure funds, that the ones that, we hold as a corporation. And then,
So your last resort would be unassigned. Yeah, so you actually have 3 options.
Well, we could also.
That we can
do
preserve.
3 things you can suggest. We're gonna go through the closure fund thing first. Second priority would be to unassigned fund balance, but that means at that point, if the finance committee or somebody comes back and said there's another avenue that looks better, we can discuss that another point.
Right, and some of that could be operational money.
It could be.
I mean, we could mix and match from all these different, we could say, well, a little bit from the facility improvement reserve and the equipment replacement and this and that. I just feel that this one is such a clear case of, landfill closure. It's an essential component of
I
our,
agree.
that
I agree.
we're trying to keep track of how much the landfill costs us too. And I don't like getting into taking money that we budgeted for the baler and all that stuff. It just makes it really complicated when you go to look back and try to figure out, this is what we spent that each year on X number of things. When you start robbing from all these different areas, and then you go to look at the actuals the next year, it's like, did recycling cost us a lot more, or did we, I don't know.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think I'd be surprised if we don't use it for closure funds, honestly, but as a backup, we can say we can use the unassigned fund balance as a backup, and if it does get to that, we'll know by our next meeting.
So is this just an estimate for would we be putting the actual work out to bid?
No,
Or
he-
is
this
this
is-
like a design build?
No, Rich is the hydrogeologist. He's already, he's already has the design. He'll hire the contractor.
He'll hire the contractor.
Do
Yeah,
we have to bid something like this
No.
where it's so much?
I mean, you can,
No, I mean, by our,
you're not gonna get a lot of, there's just not a lot of people that are gonna do this.
So is this an estimate or is this a,
This is an estimate, but he's talked with the contractors.
so we would need,
This is a
Something a little
guaranteed
more.
asking price.
This is not guaranteed at this point in time. This is a high estimate. He's got Frank Haggerty's number, which is a spread. He has cross drilling, I think. Is that what? Yeah.
ultimately, this is who we'd have to.
But so it's really difficult to find a well driller that wants to drill in a landfill.
yeah,
They're not gonna do it. This is like, we have to beg them to do it. They just don't want to do it. They don't want to put their gear because they ruin their equipment when they put it in the landfill.
Yeah, that's.
So-
That's true.
These guys, Frank Haggerty and Drumlin Environmental, they do a lot of work for Perrier. They do work for all the big companies that do big well drilling. They know all the well drillers, and there's like this many that want to do it. So they actually.
That's because of what's
Because,
been landfilled that damages equipment.
because they'll go and start drilling and they'll hit a car, metal, and they'll ruin their bits. They'll get things stuck. Like the one in Rockland, all their gear actually got stuck in the bottom and they had to go get another rig out of Massachusetts.
We're gonna build a road to start with.
No, we should be good. Yeah, I was looking at it. I have material coming in. I'm gonna go right up to the top and back in. We're gonna make a pad there. No problem.
Oh, you're building right beside the road here.
Not far from it. Yeah, right where the wells are now.
I'd be more concerned about the thing tipping over.
Well,
Maybe a weak spot.
Do you feel $100,000 is enough to, or should we look at it, something that caps us? What are you gonna say to DEP about closure fund, how much?
I mean, I'm gonna say that we need $110,000 to do this well, and that's what we plan on requesting from the closure fund. If the closure fund's where we go, I'm first gonna start off by saying, hey, you guys put this well in according to the rule. If this has a failure, which this one has, because of settlement, it'll be an argument between fire and settlement. They may or may not, offer to pay for that, but I think the reality is if they do pay for it, we're not gonna get the money right off. It'll be an installment after the fact, so we're still gonna have to come up with the money.
And they would cover potentially 100% or 90%?
90%.
Okay.
90%.
Quick question, so we touched on it briefly, but do we want to explore the option of using the current pumping well and converting it into a monitoring well?
That was what I had mentioned. I mean,
Yeah.
you might be able to save a little bit of money by doing that.
It's a small part of the total cost.
I think, I mean, you save on the abandonment of the well and you save on the installation of the monitoring well.
They're not.
The only thing is that changes the location of the production well. You might have to move it over a little bit, and then we get into an area we don't know where we've drilled before.
Okay.
They kind of know where the well is now that they've been able to get down to the bottom.
There's no cars there.
Another thing, when they drill, if they hit wood, that kind of vibrates and it takes all of the force out of the vibration, so it shakes and it doesn't drill anymore. There's all kinds of things that can go wrong with a well drilling rig in the landfill.
Is there a camera down like where they're drilling? Can they see what they're hitting?
No,
I don't
they're
know.
doing it.
Much
No,
around
they're drilling it. No. I
I
mean, you can camera it after, you don't really see much.
Yeah.
Does it ever, like, when you drill, does it ever like come out like a geyser, like?
Oh,
like a
yeah.
Snowball?
Oh, yeah,
Wow.
it's the same thing. The extraction well will be drilled by somebody different and they'll use a different drill rig. It's a smaller rig. That's why it's less money. The reason why the other well is so expensive is that you need a bigger drilling apparatus, and it has to have an inside diameter, I think, of 6 inches. So that's a big well drilling rig.
Whoever did this package, including the drone, did a good job.
This guy's,
They know what they're doing.
I mean, he's top notch.
It was covered all the bases. So
I told him that he can't retire until I do.
So just put my house in.
Now, one of the things I remember when Bariti was here and we were trying to troubleshoot is going through that operations manual and we're trying to figure out, we literally could not find an as-built drawing for the well.
No surprise.
Is that gonna be?
This is a big part of what he does. So if you read in here, he's gonna have a dial,
Sorry, I missed
he's gonna
that.
have a log. He's gonna give a work plan to the DEP. He's gonna work in
Like, I don't
conjunction
want
with
to
them.
put this in our operation.
No. This
We're gonna know
guy,
exactly how they did it.
Rich will be there and he'll be taking notes on every foot that they drill and what they find. And I mean, he's very thorough. This is what he does.
This package is very complete.
Yeah.
So fundamentally, we're looking at $110,000 in plan A would be hopefully closure, and then how long would that take?
Hopefully like DEP, but
Yeah,
No.
okay, DEP, so that'll
there's
take,
closure still on them.
how long is it gonna take to get that determination, a month, 2 months?
From DEP?
Yeah.
I don't know. I think maybe what we should do is, I should ask the 2 questions, closure, will they reimburse us? And if not, we want to use the closure funds for this well. And then I can let you know as soon as I know, and if we need to have another meeting or.
Well, I think the bottom line is that unless the board certainly disagree, that needs to be done. This is kind of basic stuff, this, to do it right, this is gonna get it done right. So the one question is how it's funded. And the first priority was, we said, plan A would be the DEP or closure. And plan B would be to use something like unassigned fund balance, if it's sufficient. I don't know how much it is.
That's plan C is the
Let's see.
unassigned. This
Okay.
Plan A is we try to get the DEP to pay.
DEP, then closure, plan B, and C
Yeah.
is. Okay.
But ultimately they would be reimbursing us
Yeah.
anyway. So I definitely agree we need to do it and we need to allocate, say these, this is where we pay for from, but in terms of going from having an estimate, I think there's probably one more step
Yeah, we can get a firm number.
that needs to happen so that we know what we're, and then, because this isn't a contract or,
Right.
it's a little different than,
So maybe what I need to I need to ask a question from DEP, and when we know if they're gonna okay it from closure reserve.
Yeah.
Then I'll make sure I'll have Rich continue working on a final contract amount will cross.
Yeah, at
well
least
drilled.
the GM.
Yeah,
I mean, that could be something in the past that the finance committee reviews those things.
mhm.
Yeah.
Just some kind of a process that, if it all falls, the board could vote tonight to move forward. And then if it all falls within, once there's a contract, if it all falls within those parameters, the finance committee could review it and determine whether it was good enough or needed to go to the board.
You could take 20% and add it to his number, and then you have a range, and then if it falls within the range, you'll be all right.
120,000.
Yeah, 120,000.
I think you should just specify. which would go 100.
That's an easy one, right?
If we want the project done, we should specify a number, but if something happens, we'll have to revisit it, but. And then the priority would be again for DEP and CLF.
One other scenario that this could play out, and I thought about this a little bit, is I could go to them and the DEP and say, we want to use closure funding for this.
Yeah.
And then they could go and say, well, we really don't want you to do this right now.
Well, possible.
And then we would have documentation of that. So if we had problems,
That's a good thing.
we'd be okay. So it kind of validates all of
Yeah.
the need or the requirement, and it's just a good way of testing whether or not that's what they're.
Yeah, I wouldn't suggest the board.
I can't imagine, but it wouldn't surprise me. So
Yeah,
they get weird about the
They
closure.
They do.
Yeah.
I would suggest the board move to do exactly that. Give it a GMP of 120.
Question, something that hasn't been touched upon. What you haven't mentioned it in here, what is the lifespan supposed? I mean, can this gentleman that draws this up and is the go-to, is this something we're gonna have to,
So
do again in 20 years, or these 50-year wells? I realize a pump can go, that you can't
Sometimes.
guarantee the workings of something that's a motorized part, but as far as the well, is this, 50 years, or is it 20 years, or what? Does anyone know?
No, because
The last one was done in the nineties,
in the
right?
nineties, and so what's happened to that one is because we added on to it. It had segmentations to it where it was
Mhm.
connected together, and now it's kind of got a kink in it. This one's gonna be contiguous and with threaded rod, and you know, it's possible that could break if it had a lot of pressure on it.
Yeah.
But you can't guarantee those things. I mean,
Right.
ideally, if we
No,
do
but
this right, it'll last 50 years, 60 years.
No, I guess what I'm asking is, in the design of this,
Yeah.
they're basing the design to last a certain period of time. Was the previous well, this well designed, or did somebody show up and drill a well and without?
So the difference between this well and the previous well was made of plastic. Okay, so what happened was, not only did we have settlement at one of the segmentations, but
Melted.
it heated up and melted and put a knuckle in it,
The extraction well.
the
Yeah,
extraction well.
yeah.
Extraction.
The monitoring well was just never installed correctly.
Mhm.
Because it wasn't a piezometer, it was a monitoring well, and then they lost the casing down in the bottom when they went to pull it, so that interfered with the screen.
So that wasn't done properly from the get-go.
Right, so one of the things that we can learn from that is when we write up this contract, it's gonna say, you know, you go and lose a casing in the bottom of the well, you're gonna have to drill another well.
Yeah,
You know,
I mean,
But you only know that stuff.
And you learn from it.
Right.
Yeah.
right, but there's gotta be some guarantee that, well, if we screw it up, you're stuck with it. That doesn't fly with me.
Yeah, we'll have to have a contract. We're not all the way there yet. We need to figure out.
They'll provide a warranty on some things.
Yes.
And they'll not be long warranties, by the way.
Right,
But max probably a year, and then the parts, and the well itself, maybe 5.
The well is not the part that usually has the problem, it's usually the pump.
right, it's the pump.
Yeah.
And then is there a way to replace, is the design of this gonna allow for replacement of the pump and a?
So I asked for a second pump. I want 2 pumps, one right on the shelf. I wanna be able to just,
Yep,
I mean, right now, we're flying by the seat of our pants. We've got a broken well,
Mhm.
an old pump. It was a used pump that they put in there,
Mhm.
and it's in the wrong place.
Right.
I mean, I just don't like running that
It's
way.
not, it's a hell of a different than the. it's not
There's
different
too many
than a-
Wrong variables.
Yeah,
In one well.
and I can't take it out of the casing. I gotta have another person do it. So, you know,
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not 100% repair, but it's not some different kind of pump, but.
yeah, but if it's December and, you know,
Well,
no, you may not get someone to come in here and pull that pump.
same thing at your house with a water well,
Exactly,
there's no difference,
right?
so, and they can last for decades.
Mhm.
But anyway, I still think it'd be wise, we got if the board agrees, of course, to move to put a JMP on this, so Dave can move ahead with contracting, and we can bring the contract back later, make sure we're covered, but we need to move on this. And there's, well, to me, there's no question we need this.
You know, and you have me here now to help
Yeah.
do this. I mean,
Yeah.
you don't know if I'm gonna be here in 5 years, and
Right.
you may not want
Yeah.
someone new trying to figure this out.
Yeah, right. I think so. We've been.
Yeah, we went through that.
We've been planning this thing too long.
Mhm.
You know, from when I came here, the first thing was sneaker net. They had to go run over and turn the pump and then check how much flow was going on manually between the well and that, no controls whatsoever. It was about 1960s technology that we had. So it's
Some of that is still in place. Yeah.
yeah, that's up to the board, but I was suggesting we are, tab at $120,000 GMP.
Sorry, I'm not familiar with that.
Guarantee next week.
Okay.
It means you don't exceed that in the process. And the priority would be the DEP closure funds, and then if we have to address it, we'll address it through funds we have on the same fund balance. I don't think we can get there. What do you think?
I just have a question on contracts. Would we have contract with all the subs and guarantees in those contracts that they would replace the well if they didn't install it correctly, or would we have a sole contract with Drumlin?
I think we'll end up with a contract with the well driller.
Okay.
For that piece, because Rich is saying in here that, you know, there's no markup on the sub.
Right.
So we would handle, I mean, that's,
Yeah,
not a lot of people will even do that. He's like,
you said it was cross.
I think that's what I think that was.
Right on Route 3.
No, no, it was across. Yeah, anybody I've used before, say.
So, because I was upon the tree. Well,
Aggie something?
No,
I don't know,
that's
it's the
the,
name of drill days at the beginning, you know, then just,
you just said the well driller.
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I mean, but sometimes what happens, the benefit of having those markups is that, you know, somebody at the top is taking responsibility for. Maybe for
Right,
it
you
stays,
have like a general contractor or.
Okay, that's where they make the money.
right, so I mean, we don't want to be, if things go
Pine State Drilling.
wrong,
Okay.
I'd like to be able to hold one entity responsible for something going wrong possible.
I would work with Rich on drafting up some type of warranty with the driller.
Yeah.
So Rich does things a little different than most of the engineers that we work with. Like if you were trying to do this with the engineering outfit that we use right now, you know, they would try to put all these people under them. They would be the general contractor,
Right.
but they would mark everything up a lot more.
Oh, like a CD Mahara.
Oh, absolutely.
Oh, God, I
Yeah.
mean, they're just,
Can I have a motion to the effect? The board?
I move that we allocate, authorize, plan for.
Allocate in $120,000 guaranteed maximum price for this scope of work in the memo. But the priority being to get DEP to fund first, closure second.
The primary,
Well-
DEP doesn't, not, so the closure funds are ours, and we are really pay for it every.
To get them to, however you want to word that, reimbursement. Just so we have that, the funding, we plan the funding to come from.
We need to direct the facility manager to
Yes.
negotiate the
Yes,
contract
that's correct.
not to exceed $120,000
Correct.
with the stipulation, or not stipulation, that's the wrong word, with the understanding or something like
To,
that.
you know, to pursue the
Yeah.
sources of, you know,
Yeah.
to pursue, you know, alternate sources of
Yeah, Yeah.
financing through the.
and I think Dave can come up with that terminology,
Mhm.
although we should probably do it here, but I think we need to direct him to negotiate that contract with those
That's perfect.
Yeah,
certain.
That's perfect, yeah.
So starting with closure reimbursement, then if that, then inquiring about using closure reserve funds.
Yeah.
And then if that doesn't work, then assign software.
That's correct.
starting with using the mitigation
Right,
money. I
reimbursement.
forget what it is they call that.
Reimbursement, I think, is the,
Right,
for lack of a better term, but I think that's possible. That's what they would probably use anyway.
yeah.
So let's just clarify the motion.
So I would move that we direct the facility manager to negotiate a contract for the replacement of the monitoring for of the extraction well and new piezometer in the amount not to exceed $120,000 and to pursue reimbursement options from the DEP first, and with the remainder to be funded from either closure reserves or the unassigned fund balance
Yeah.
pending
Absolutely.
approval of the use of
Yeah.
closure funds.
Second. Motion made, second, further discussion. All in favor? Unanimous. Thank you all, what the discussion.
Good job.
Yeah, very
You got me
Yeah,
going.
it's not easy.
It isn't easy.
good. Get a good one.
I would. I got that.
The last item on our agenda is any comment, any comments on the financials that are in there, which are partial from, I can't remember what month they were, like 5 months.
Well,
And it's basically showing.
Oh, this is this year.
Yeah, basically, yeah, it's through, what this is, well, it doesn't give you the date, but it's 10/19, so you're talking really. July, August, September, October. You're talking 3.5 months of performance of the entity. What it shows is the overlay, the golden numbers that the entity is in the green at the moment by about 50 or, oh, I'm sorry, close to $200,000. That's where it's at right now.
Yeah, and one of the other important things that Beth had put together is if you look on the manager's report there, it tells you where we're at in terms of taking in landfill revenue, which is our biggest revenue account. Last year, we were underperforming in Q1. And this new FY23 fiscal year, we're doing significantly better. So hopefully that continues to trend in that direction. And
When did the fee increases go into effect?
September 13th,
What is it?
September 13th,
Last one.
20.
So we're a little over a month in. Have we gotten any,
No,
I haven't heard any
Yeah,
negative feedback on that or,
It's a little soon to tell, but I think we'll know better by end of the year numbers as we go into the next calendar year.
Why do we think last fiscal year's Q1 was so low?
we kind of talked with the auditor about that. And I mean, a lot of it was, I think he said, Mike had basically put the budget together based on a big year with COVID.
Yeah.
So we had a lot of material that was brought into the landfill. So he kind of used that same number for FY22 and it just didn't come to be.
Yeah, okay.
and then we also, we also started the practice of this mixed load option. Where you come in and if you have both things, you don't have to go to the scale twice and then you get charged the higher amount. So some demo was going under that account, but still not, not quite enough to explain the difference. We were still, it wasn't just short on like what we budgeted, optimistically budgeted, we were short. But, yeah.
Anyway, it's 3.5 months. We'll keep tracking. Obviously, it's not a significant sample.
Yeah.
We will be, again, remember, we're looking at budget in January for the next year. That's even early, but for developing, we only have maybe half a year's worth of information.
I mean, that's why it's the budgeting process here is really challenging because we do it so far ahead of time. And we already do it ahead of time for our towns, but we're really having to look into the future here.
Yeah.
I mean, I think you always want to budget on the low end of the average from landfill revenue.
Yeah, I don't know what that is normally our philosophy is
That's
to
how I would.
under budget for revenue and
Absolutely.
but I don't know how there was a lot going on. I don't know how that's the process, but it was definitely optimistic.
It's gotten better in my opinion, thankfully, but from past years.
So I got one question. And it kind of related to financials, but maybe not, but you made mention of the credit card.
Oh,
Right.
So can we just get a quick update? And it's so obviously, I think who we had, it's just not gonna be able to get it done.
So, I mean, I'm not gonna go into this too much, but a lot of these projects were half started.
Yeah.
So I tried to pick up the pieces. Beth really wasn't involved in a lot of the credit card piece. What ended up happening was when they started off with this whole switching over to the credit card system, they started saying, okay, well, you need to update your system, your internet system. You need to update all of your point of service software. You need new phones. We need new phones too. And then next thing you know, this thing just kind of grew into this giant improvement of everything, which doesn't mean it isn't needed, but it probably, my choice would have been take a little bite at a time. Don't try and do all of these things at once.
Yeah.
So we signed an agreement with them for X amount of dollars and asked them to do X, Y, and Z, and basically they haven't done any of it. We got to the point where I was putting pressure on him to, let's get this going. And I wasn't hearing anything, and then I was told that the point of sale system that they were gonna go with, that we had bought the software for.
We bought the hardware, haven't we bought some hardware?
The software and the hardware, that's correct. That was sunsetting and no longer gonna be used anymore. And we had an agreement with them. And through this Ardia,
Yeah,
and so we had to cancel the agreement through Ardia, and it had gone through, the only person that could do it was Jody. It was the most convoluted thing you've ever seen in your life. So
Not the most convoluted.
well, I mean, I'm exaggerating, but so make a long story short, she did the person that's helping at Ardia, it's not really her fault, so to speak, because she wasn't the one that was involved with this when we started it. She says, you really just need a credit card machine. She goes, you don't need a point of sale, you don't need all this other stuff. She goes, you really just need a credit card machine. And so what we did was Beth and I talked about it, and we said, well, let's get another entity in here to give us kind of their opinion of it. And we brought Harbor Digital in, they talked with us a little bit about it. I felt like I'm trying to recuperate as much of the money that we had dished out already to Ardia as I can. And the only way I can really do that is by working with them, I felt, with just at least implementing the credit card piece. And then trying to have them reimburse me for the things they haven't given me yet. But we've given them $6,000 or $10,000 already, and we don't have anything. So, and that happened in the beginning,
Yeah,
right?
but
That happened way in the beginning, so, yeah, so.
Yeah, I mean, and Mike had said this was the area where he didn't feel as confident about, he knows lots about the mechanical parts of things, and he had said, they're telling me we need all this different stuff, and I mean, I do think they're making a good, their argument for needing, that whole system where you can, like, if you work at a restaurant where you choose things, was fairly sound in some ways, because it's a lot, you've got a lot going on in the gatehouse, and so to be able to do it quickly, but at the same time, if you go and do that, then you have to train everybody how to use that too. So it was hard to argue with them about what else we needed to go along with it, but
So the bottom line answer to your question is we're still struggling.
yeah, I mean, I went into the gatehouse, I talked with the people working there, and I said, if I had just a credit card machine, would that work all right for you? And it was like, yeah, that would work fine, Jeremy. I said, do you need a point of sale system, or can we usually continue to use the QuickBooks system, point of sale service? He said, yeah, Beth actually needs to have her QuickBooks updated. The point of sale thing in the gatehouse, probably instead of buying a restaurant type of point of sale, you ought to buy a landfill based application, which they have, which we have in Rockland. It's called SMS Turbo. It's set up for scales and for trash, and that's what it's made for. It's not made for a restaurant. Right. So my thought is, let's take a little baby step. Let's invest in just a small credit card reader. We might have to upgrade our security, but it'll take a credit card with a chip on it, or a tap, I think is what it is, for security purposes. That'll be 90% of the transactions that go through there that want to use a credit card. That'll get us going to the point where we can utilize a credit card. We're not going to buy anything else right off, and then we're going to look at each one of those things independently by themselves and say, okay, let's do the phones, let's do the QuickBooks, let's do
so the upgrade, the QuickBooks upgrade, shouldn't our little house there talk to Beth?
it does, right? That's the way it's set
So
up
those
now.
should go hand in hand.
Yes,
Okay.
yeah,
Unless we get a new system. is what they were saying.
right, which would change what she uses. So those are all discussions we want to, but Beth and I, we want to really look at it and make sure it's what we want. She might want just QuickBooks, and we'll stick with something that works with that. We might say this other system works really well, but we're not going to go and rush into it.
Yeah.
We're going to take our time and methodically go through and pick out the right thing.
Okay.
so that means we're not the part, sorry, I didn't.
No, I'm sorry.
So this money that we've given some entity, you said $6,000,
$6,000, I think.
okay, what did we give them money for? And how does that work? Normally, a service takes place,
Mhm.
you get an invoice and then you pay for it. We gave these people money up front and they've done nothing.
You, Beth, you were there when that happened, if you want to.
That would be a little
Well, it
odd
was
to me.
Mike's decision, usually we would. You know, but he didn't choose to do that. They asked for a certain amount. They asked pretty much almost all of it up front.
Which is contracted non-incurred, doesn't get a contract, somebody will ask for a down payment. And when you get your question is, do we get a value out of it or not? In terms of a third, that guy can't answer, and I'm sure we didn't, but.
We haven't really got anything from that.
Well.
And it was supposed to be much faster, you know, it was not supposed to take
Huh.
a year.
Okay.
Well, I mean,
maybe-
We're not talking about $200 here, you know, this is real money.
Yeah.
So it's, you can't just act like, oh, it's just kind of.
No, I think we're pursuing reimbursement.
Okay.
Yes.
No, so I did talk with them. This is what I said. I said, listen, you know, it's obvious that you can't fulfill the agreement.
Right,
And, you know, we're looking at maybe just a credit card reader now.
Right.
So I had the invoice of the itemized list of things they were gonna provide for us. I sent that back to them and said, please tell me which one of these things you've accomplished
right.
and which ones you haven't, and I would like to have the money back for the things you haven't.
That answers my question.
That was
And
what I-
that's first
That's
request.
the reasonable
Yeah,
course of action at this point.
right. And I'm trying to work with them on this other piece of it, so it's not like we're just walking
Cutting
away.
away, right.
Yeah,
Is it already in Rockport?
yeah.
Yeah, and we want to get into not necessarily disparaging them, because there was, I mean, on our side of things, there's been a lot of change in management, and so we truthfully, we don't know 100% exactly what they were told and what was said. So there's definitely been, I agree, there's been a deficiency
There is not,
since.
it's not in black and white. I got calls from them and emails from them saying, no, yeah, and we've been trying to get a hold of your operations for a month now. We have, nobody's returned calls. Nobody's done a lot, so I'm gonna look into it. And sure enough, there's some inefficiencies. That, we're pursuing it, and the way David suggested, it's the right way to do it. But to Allison's point, I agree, we're not living it like.
And we actually, there's some argument here that we really didn't sign a contract necessarily, so there's.
There's a lot of stuff we need to look at to get a point.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah,
But I mean, they can't perform, they can't finish what we talked about
we may not need.
on their end.
Well, I think they feel they could, and that they could come up with a replacement. It's like, well, they subcontracted with whatever touchscreen combo software provider, and they had signed up a contract sort of on our behalf in order to fulfill these obligations. They did get us out of that.
They're
But-
being really cooperative. They're trying hard. I think that the reality is that it may just not be a good relationship at this point in time. You know, it's just.
No, so they're not just ignoring, not doing it as they have.
No, they're working with us, and, you know, I think a lot of it is they had turnover, we had turnover.
Well, I remember they said they were begging for us to respond.
Well, that was a little bit, they didn't.
Anyway,
They should-
before we go on to German debt, just what would be the date of November for a November meeting? It would be the 16th, because you don't want Thanksgiving week, correct?
No, I can't, I think it's 20.
Thanksgiving week,
That's.
It's on that.
yeah, I know, but my point is, I'm not sure we want to schedule something, if we schedule it, for the week of
November
Thanksgiving.
16th.
16th, okay, that is not. So if there is a meeting in November, which you'll be notified well in advance of, but it'll be on the 16th of November, Wednesday evening.
So it's like 3 weeks.
That's right, that's why I'm suggesting, there's a 50-50 probability we may not do it. We'll have to see how Dave tracks and what he means from the board decision making wise. And we'll know that pretty quick.
So is that when we start the budget?
No, I don't think January.
That's how much was the finish the budget.
Did we change when the budget deadline?
We did.
We ran into that one, yeah.
No, that's in the interlocal agreement, but we asked permission from the town, you know, the towns have been forced over the years to work.
Right.
Right, so we told the towns when we got permission to push it to February or?
March.
Did we?
I know, I told him.
Did we? I mean, it says it in the interlocal.
Yeah, it's there. It's never been there.
It's a year, right?
So,
And
but it's not.
But it wasn't getting done that
Start
for a few years.
Well, see, what they want to have is, we can give them a placeholder number.
Sure.
Too, which.
Sure.
is really what they need, because they don't have the power to say no. But, you know, that's not the attitude that we take, but it says it in, that's one of the things that we really, once we get some energy, the governance committee, there are quite a few things in the interlocal agreement that need to be changed, but we've always shy away from that because it has to go to the voters in all 4 towns, and it's just a lot of work.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I don't think it'll be comfortable.
No. But anyway, with this board, we'll be addressing the budget in January.
The finance committee will be addressing it quite a bit before.
Right.
Hopefully not as many meetings as we sometimes have in the past. But
So with
So
that,
just, sorry, quick question, just to wrap up this. So do you have a rough estimate for when the credit card processing will be implemented?
I mean, so there's several avenues I can take. I can work through Camden National Bank. We're looking at the possibility of using what the town uses, which is the InfoMe or something.
the name state,
Yeah,
whatever
right,
thing.
and that's a little less money to operate under that system.
but practically speaking, you're talking to next year.
You mean calendar year or fiscal year?
Maybe not, maybe not. I mean, I'm gonna try and shoot for the next meeting is what I'm gonna try and do with progress. You know, I mean,
3 weeks.
I'm not gonna say all.
Usually does it down at the harbor.
I mean, it's really just a credit card reader and it's not a huge thing. And what would happen is you would use the credit card machine. Beth will have to actually handle that separately, because it'll be like a separate type of system where she'll log in and get, you know, be able to download, you know, what's happened and all the transactions through that system. And then she'll have to provide Jody with that information. But that is just a stepping stone to get to where we need to be.
Right.
And we won't be able to do the online payments. We're just gonna put that. That was one of the things with this whole new system. It was like people that had accounts were gonna be able to pay their bills
No,
online. and-
none of that. This is just somebody coming to the gatehouse and saying, I've got 5 tires and I want to use my debit card.
Yeah.
This is all.
All right. I have a motion to adjourn.
To adjourn.
Second.
Second, motion made, seconded, all those in favor? Thank you all very much, and like I said, I'll notify you in 10 days about the 16th of November on.
Well, you had a lot of questions.
Can't help it. I'm curious.
Thank you, lady and gentlemen.